I wanted to like the Technomancer. I really did. But I knew it would be flawed, which is why I picked it up when it was only $15. Unfortunately, it still managed to disappoint. Which blew my mind because the reasons I disliked this Spiders RPG is the reason I like other Spiders RPGs. But before we can make sense of that, I'd like to introduce you to a good friend of mine. The Spiders RPG. Or at least the Spiders RPG which started with Mars Warlogs, where they found their niche, their clique. In Mars Warlogs, they adopted a combat system similar to The Witcher 2, in which you spec up one of 3 skill trees and dodge and shoot and magic your way around enemies in the way that best suits you. And it worked remarkably well for this $15 downloadable game from a developer I've never heard of before. This stiff but deep combat, crunchy and very challenging with a backwards difficulty curve getting easier over time, mixed with a good crafting system, forged a very engaging game, in its gameplay at least. And this hard-as-nails Witcher-esque gameplay is shared in Bound by Flame, which is very much just more of the same, but better in every way. Let me explain those 3 skill trees I mentioned earlier a bit more clearly. You have Warrior, which is big heavy weapons and nasty beating people, and you have Rogue, which is quicker movements, more stealth gameplay, fighting from a distance, and then you have your magic. In the Mars games, it's Technomancy, and Bound by Flame, it's demonic power. But these 3 archetypes are shared across all 3 games, creating an iconic experience, despite being derived from The Witcher. And I gotta admit, I fell in love with it. I wasn't digging it at first, because of how backwards the difficulty curve is. I mean, it's very challenging to start these games, but once you get the hang of it, it's great fun. You feel very accomplished with yourself once you're just dancing around and beating the shit out of people that you couldn't have before. It's much like Dark Souls in that respect, but not as fair. But you fall in love with this flawed system because there's a lot of heart behind it. In fact, Mars Warlogs actually feels better from a gameplay perspective than The Witcher 2 does, once you're past the 3-hour mark. So remember that the combat is flawed. We're gonna get back to that. But let's go to the story for a moment, because this is a big reason why the Technomancer failed. The Spiders RPG story is both cliché and simple and bland, really, but also enthralling. In the Spiders RPG, much of the story is told through your companions, and they're handled much like Mass Effect companions. You have an array of archetypes with interesting backstories who fill a need or role in your party, while also fleshing out the world with their own motivations and opinions and backstories and all that good stuff. And it really is good stuff, because they put a lot of effort into making these characters interesting and memorable, despite them coming out so bland a lot of the time. On the very far left is Mr. Immortal Soul, who pirates mortal bodies, who deals with them aging, unlike your character. Next to him is Swamp Bitch / love interest. And on the very far right is Mr. Honor, who's a real bitch to fight and get in your party in the first town. And I can't remember any of their names, but I can remember what they did in events surrounding them, which is more than I can say for most games. And I'm still a huge fan of Innocence from Mars Warlogs, despite all this time and despite that game being much cheaper and arguably lower quality. But overall, these games and their stories follow a common trend. There's a large world-scale conflict going on, and you're just some guy trying to get by, who ends up getting involved in his own smaller conflict, which over time and swashbuckling adventure rises, engages, and overtakes the plot and issues of the main huge global conflict. And it's good stuff because there's an air of mystery around this larger global conflict. For example, in Mars Warlogs, you're going head-to-head with the Technomancers, and they have this weird fetish for colonist-era equipment, and it's never completely explained why, beyond that it's somehow tied to their technological electrical powers. And I really wanted to know why they were so obsessed with it, and it's one of the reasons I was so excited for the Technomancer. I wanted to figure out the mystery. It had me hooked. Why are these people obsessed with this colonist equipment? I want to know. And it's the same deal with Bound by Flame, though that game explains itself a bit more clearly. but not in the beginning. They keep their universes lively and interesting by not telling you everything, and I respect them for that. Too many games today get bogged down by lengthy exposition dumps nobody cares about, or will even pay attention to, so God forbid you put anything important in there. But let's talk about budget and length. Two key ingredients of the Spiders RPG cake, which made Mars Warlogs and Bound by Flame excellent, but the Technomancer horrible. So take a look at this map here. You see how large and intricate it is? It's actually empty. All Spiders RPG's maps are built using long, lengthy, windy corridors without much of anything in them. The environments usually end up looking bland. The NPCs walking the hallways aren't really voiced. However, these hallways and corridors are absolutely packed with enemies. And even if you kill them, they will come back and there will be loads of them. That's just how the Spiders RPG works. And this is something I'm actually a fan of. The game knows its story isn't its strong point, so they place enemies all over the place so you can just focus on the combat. It's really nice, it's really fun. And it's a good way to make the game longer on a budget, and most of the Spiders RPGs were made on budgets. For $15, Mars Warlogs is a tight, compact RPG lasting about 13 hours. Hubs, corridors, and maps are small, side content is minimal, animations are few, which is a strong point, let me get into that in a minute, and combat is plenty. And Bound by Flame is bound by much of the same. A slightly larger budget, making for a slightly larger game and a slightly higher price tag, like a better Mars Warlogs. But environments are still small and side content is still pretty minimal, compared to the hulking 30-hour beast which is the Technomancer, which is larger than both of the prior games combined. A larger budget leads to larger areas, and larger areas lead to more backtracking, as well as a much longer story, which, as we discussed earlier, is definitely not this game's strong point. The extensive backtracking and horrible map design are what really hurt this game the most, though. Take these barracks, for instance, which you can't sneak into unless it's nighttime. And to make it nighttime, you either have to wait about an hour real time or backtrack all the way across this map, wait through 2 loading screens to get to the other map so you can sleep in your bed to make it nighttime, then walk back through that map, through 2 more loading screens to this map so you can get in. And every single quest and side quest, everything in this game is designed this way. So you have to go and backtrack across these crisscrossing hub worlds to get to other hub worlds, to get to other hub worlds, so you can get one thing done and then go all the way back through the entire thing to do it all over again. It's just dead time adding up. You feel yourself aging and dying as you play the Technomancer. However, in Mars Warlogs and Bound by Flame, the other 2 games, which were significantly shorter and on much lower budgets, there was backtracking, but not this much, because the maps were far smaller and there was a lot less. The game would have benefited from actually having less side content, because there would be less reason to just backtrack 24/7. And it's not like The Witcher, where you want to backtrack or do anything, do all of this extra stuff for these side quests, because these side quests in the Technomancer aren't interesting. Every side quest boils down to go here, kill this, come back. Or go here, pick this up, come back. For no interesting payout, no massive rewards, nothing. And there are so many side quests in this game. And they're all exactly the same, and it's painful doing them, because none of them even line up. If you remember in the original Borderlands, side quests would all line up in similar areas, so you could knock them all out together at once. It's not the case in this game. You pretty much have to knock out each one individually, which further contributes to that dead time stacking, killing you incrementally with these horribly dead seconds, adding up over time, and it's painful. It's really painful. But it's not just the side missions. The main quest functions exactly the same. Go here, across these maps, do this, and then you get a small cutscene. But nothing big or interesting ever happens, because the few plot twists that they have you can see from a mile away, and then they don't even do anything. You don't even get to see the plot twist happen. I mean, right as you're in the beginning of the game getting ready to go see your big plot twist, your friends just come out and say, "Hey, plot twist is about to happen, let's just not get involved. So you don't. You don't get involved with the plot twist and you just leave. And it's maddening because one of your friends, quote unquote, who comes to save you, you only see her one time in one main mission earlier, and it's not even hinted that she's a friend. But this is just an issue with Spider RPGs in general. The writing is not very good. The hook of their story is the mystery and your character's smaller conflict, and watching it unfold and overcome this larger global conflict stewing in the background. But that doesn't happen here. In the Technomancer, all mysteries built up by the previous game are answered within the first 10 minutes, and they don't give you any more mysteries to wonder about. They pull up the curtains and that's it. They don't give you anything else. You're just here, this is happening. And your main character isn't even relatable. He is just some guy, but he's not some guy in the middle of some bigger conflict. He's just a piece of cardboard that spits lightning everywhere. And that's not to say the other protagonists were far better, but at least we weren't dealing with them for 30 hours. And that takes us back to the crux of the issue. The other games were flawed, just as the Technomancer is flawed, but they also weren't as long or expansive. They didn't waste your time or pretend to be AAA games. They hooked you with interesting plots, heartfelt characters, and snappy combat. And then they ended. The Technomancer takes its larger budget and then makes a larger, lower budget game, if that makes any sense. They're buttering bread for dinner, and instead of buying more butter, they bought more bread. For instance, the animations and combat are much nicer looking, but because of how specific they are, you can only dodge to the left, to the right, forward, and back. You can't dodge diagonally forward or diagonally back, which makes combat very frustrating, especially when you're fighting huge numbers of enemies in super cramped quarters, which is a serious issue of all Spiders games. You're fighting loads of enemies in super tight areas, but having less control of your characters while you're doing it isn't challenging, it's frustrating. And this issue wasn't in Bound by Flame or Mars Warlogs, who each only had 1 or 2 dodge animations and could be used in whatever direction you wanted. And for a game with such a high budget based around strategic positioning and battlefield awareness, it's a wonder how this camera and lock-on system get away with being so faulty. And because of all these issues, I can't recommend the Technomancer to anybody beyond die-hard fans. And even then, it's a hard sell, because the reasons you likely enjoyed the last games are missing here. There is no magic, there is no mystery, and any semblance of heart is washed out over 30 hours. 30 mind-numbing hours of backtracking, meaningless side quests, poorly written story, and combat which doesn't feel as snappy as it used to, because it isn't. Instead of using their larger budget to innovate and create something new and carve out their own place in the world as a developer, they chose to do more of the same on a much larger industrial scale, resting on the laurels they never really earned. That said, I still strongly recommend you pick up Bound by Flame and Mars Warlogs, especially now that they've aged and they're a lot cheaper. They're a lot of fun, and they're really short, and they give you a taste of the mystery and magic Spiders could achieve one day. As we await their next big project, Greedfall, set on a remote island seeping with magic, rumored to be filled with riches and lost secrets. The same ingredients which made Mars Warlogs and Bound by Flame so special.